98. So we're talking about digital cash being like first kind of talked about in 1989 and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't even a figment of imagination at that point.
Bro, I was graduating high school, son. like when we talk about 9/11 for you, this was like
it's like the fall of Rome.
This was like I know it happened, but I was barely conscious. I don't have a conscious memory of it. I was 3 years old when 9/11 happened.
Brian, where were you when 9/11 happened? Do you remember?
I do, yeah. I was working in a place on Southwark Road, which is just on the South Bank near the Tate Modern in London.
And like, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we had clients in New York, so we got kind of early signals of it. And I went down the pub for I think by that time it was probably, whatever, like it was kind of late lunch kind of thing. So I went down the pub and they had a flat screen and watched it unfold.
And I've been curious about other cultures, like how they reacted, because like it was a full societal stop. It was the first full societal stop that I had as an adult. Like everything shut down. And in my hometown, even they did the stoplights all went 4-way red. They actually called it, because in my town, some of the pilots trained. And there's a local flight school in my hometown called Flight Safety. And before 1 p.m., we were under martial law and had FBI agents before 1 p.m. in our town. It was a nuts thing.
Wow.
But for another day, we're here to talk about crypto. and before we get going, I want to tell everyone that I was corrected like half an hour before we came on the show on Crypto.com. Was not served papers yet. That's all rumor. And Aussie, you had some insight into the Twitter account that shared this account. What were some of your deets on that?
Yeah, so Whale Alert is the Twitter account that shared it. And they seem to post pretty regularly. But most intriguingly is they also seem to be the first source for the whole CZ Red Notice Interpol alert post. And that sent the whole market into flight yesterday. And no other news source has really been able to confirm that. And they've even backpedaled and said that there's no official confirmation of the red notice.
Yeah.
And to me, it's kind of 2 or 3 big provocative posts by this Twitter account. And it almost makes me feel like they've got a big short that they shorted maybe at like 28 or 25 or 27, and they're trying to scare the market so they can get out of it because
Jared, I thought you would appreciate that. Yeah.
Because there's no other reason. No one else is reporting that. And it's not like the market has all of a sudden confirmed or denied it. And these are big accusations that they're making.
And I fell victim to this. And Brian, you worded this well in LinkedIn. How did you word it? You said, in a post-truth world, anything is believable or something like that. What did you say?
I can't remember now without
the fog of war. He said the fog of war in a post-truth society. So I got suckered into that. So to everyone watching, if I post anything about Crypto.com, I recant. Please forgive me, and we'll move forward with saying Crypto.com is not being served Wells notices as of yet. But we've got Brian Naughton, and Brian Naughton is someone that I've been wanting to talk to. Brian, you seem like a super smart guy. This is my first time meeting him. Jerry, have you and Brian connected before?
Yeah, we were on I forget exactly the name. It was a long name. We were on kind of a panel talking about crypto, Web3, the future. And
that's right. Once.
Yeah. What's going to go on. And that was an interesting one because I feel like there was a bunch of internet connection issues. We had some other panelists that were in Africa and they were just having tough times. And, when the internet's tough and you're in this situation, it's not fun. Tristan says, Brian, what's going on, man? So I also want to apologize, Brian. I should have been on earlier on the pre-call here. It's just Chelsea's playing Liverpool, and I wanted to get as much of that.
Oh my God, that's where you were.
Yeah.
You defended him, Grant.
I did defend him.
Well,
I
I'm
did.
also just like burnt out as shit, and then I have like a 30-minute window between Web 2 and Web 3, and I feel like Clark Kent going through the
The phone
phone
booth.
booth, and sometimes it
Spinning.
just takes longer. Like the other day, I think a couple weeks ago, I just literally walked outside and looked at the sun for like a minute, and then came back inside. So, anyways, Brian, I should have been on earlier to welcome you into the behind the scenes.
Was it worth it? What was the score?
Yeah.
It was zeros. Reece James had a banger, but it was offside, so it's fine. It will be all right. I mean, right now we're basically speaking Mandarin for Grant and Aussie,
Understood.
but in as many words, you know, as I was texting with a buddy of mine, his name's Corey, he's an Irish kid from Boston, and he said, quote, they might as well have flip-flops on for this mid-table clash. So, oh, how the tables have turned for Chelsea and Liverpool. Anyways, back to crypto. Brian, it is great to have you on. We're very excited.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Grant, I like the background. This is a different vibe today. It's a
I'm
lighter
trying
vibe.
I'm trying a different background. Yeah, I mean, when we're like this, we're like cool. We're like this, we're like cool. We'll figure it out. Taking cues from what was that one YouTube account, Coin Banter? I don't know.
Coin Bureau.
No. There was Crypto
Banter.
They have these great backgrounds. So anyways,
gotcha.
I'm a poser today. But okay, so this is what I mentioned to Brian before we came on. Brian doesn't like to talk about things he doesn't know about. And even when begged for speculation, he's a good citizen because he said, I'm not going to speculate, man. So, but he does touch on some things that I think we could really benefit from. And again, I don't want to make this for those watching any sort of interview, but we have a specialist or at least an interesting writer who's been doing technical writing for a long time or for a while. And you wrote, Aussie, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, recently about ZK rollups. And your Substack, for those who want to check it out, we'll put the link in the show notes below, but check out Brian's Substack. Your tagline is like a newsletter for crypto, but in layman's terms, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I think it's there are a lot of people who are interested in this space, and I think a lot of the existing newsletters are quite technical. I mean, I love to follow the Bankless crew and all of that stuff, but perhaps it's such a technical field that it can be a bit alienating for a general audience. So I'm kind of trying to bridge that gap really in terms of bringing a kind of a recap on the news, crypto news on a weekly basis, and also to do a bit of storytelling and trying to focus on, quality writing in that space really.
It needs to happen. So then before I ask you for how you would describe in layman's terms a ZK rollup, we're going to play a fun quick quiz. Aussie Jarrett, what's a ZK rollup?
So it's a zero knowledge rollup. That's why that's a ZK. That's what ZK is summarized as.
Mm-hmm.
And a rollup is essentially something that combines a whole bunch of smaller transactions usually on a separate blockchain, and then sends them to the main blockchain to be done in a batch.
Okay. Brian's nodding. Brian's giving you the approval.
And it's a way essentially of scaling Ethereum and managing gas fees.
Okay. Jarrett, what would you say?
To be honest, I'm pretty agnostic about what these ZK rollups are. So I read Brian's blog last night and I could regurgitate that back. I think what Aussie said is spot on.
Okay.
I mean, the way I think of it is it's just a more efficient way to process and transfer data. And I think Brian in his blog, on his Substack, he says he has a bunch of great points, and I hope that everyone gets a chance to read it. But the way that he breaks down this is really great. He says, quote, I don't know nearly enough to unpack the backstory of this to the satisfaction of a technically gifted person, but it's worth trying to do so regardless. Which, if Not Crypto Bros could have a slogan, it would be that. So
we don't basically paraphrase for the extrovert. We don't know what we're talking about, but I'm going to take a stab.
But we're going to talk.
Okay, so Brian, your moment is here. How would you describe a ZK rollup in layman's terms?
Where to start? I mean, I'm not a dev or anything, and quite a lot of this goes over my head. But I think Austin did a very good job there. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, most of the layer 2 scaling solutions are based on roll-ups, and roll-ups, as Austin said, are to do with batch processing, so that you take quite a lot of the heavy lifting off the main chain. And the reason that was done is because Ethereum was having scaling problems in terms of network congestion and gas fees and all the rest of it. And I guess you could see it as a kind of people are used to the idea of compression in terms of file, zip files and extracting them later, or maybe JPEGs versus TIFFs or whatever. It's a similar kind of thing going on. But what interested me really was the fact that Vitalik buried a sort of an Easter egg, a message in the first transaction that happened on the Polygon chain,
Okay.
the ZK EVM chain. So that was really the hook for me, because I kind of thought, obviously it mirrors the Satoshi Genesis block inscription in terms of, being this kind of hidden message.
Interesting.
And the message was a few million constraints for man, unconstrained scalability for mankind. And I mean, that's obviously a not particularly well-veiled reference to the moon landing, sort of Neil Armstrong wordage. So that kind of got me thinking, what does he mean by that? And I think he means what he says, which is that this is a moon landing moment for Ethereum.
Interesting. Now, good.
No, well, I mean, basically, what that means is that unconstrained scalability for mankind or womankind is within grasp. And then I saw something else. I didn't bookmark it, but because I think it was on Instagram or something. But someone asking him, like, when would Ethereum be done such that you could walk away? Without fear of it sort of not fulfilling its longer range purpose. And he said by the end of this year. So I think that kind of fits pretty well. I think basically
what?
Yeah, so I think what he's saying is we're pretty much there. We've got Shanghai and the sharding to look forward to, but I think the arrival of these ZK roll-ups, these particularly, my understanding is the ones that it makes it seamless, the interoperability, because one of the problems with, for example, optimistic roll-ups, which I classified as perhaps overly optimistic roll-ups.
I liked that reference. I thought it was great.
Is that they don't go the last mile in terms of finality. So ZK EVMs represent a real opportunity for Ethereum to scale with no constraints, basically.
Interesting. And I heard a backhanded meme at this that I was mentioning to Aussie before, and that is roll-ups or scalable solutions are being touted as a feature for what is so obviously a bug, and that is scale. And that's obviously kind of like a rather nihilistic way to view it, but they're patting themselves on the back and taking credit for this. It seems like that from the outside looking in, but that's not your sentiment in the Substack. Like this is even though it's a little bit not reverse engineered, but engineered after the fact, it's still making, it's almost like third parties are making Ethereum what Ethereum's original vision for Ethereum was. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
I would disagree with your bug being a feature.
Just go ahead.
Because ZK rollups and rollup solutions were always part of the roadmap for Ethereum. Ethereum was never made to be a single blockchain. The sole source for transactions. It's essentially supposed to be the kind of enterprise level, the enterprise scale of everything. And you're actually supposed to, these rollups are supposed to be for all of these smaller blockchains and these smaller transactions and these regular users to use.
I didn't realize that. So like from a white paper genesis point, like that was kind of the ideal all along.
From my understanding, I've never read the Ethereum white paper.
Interesting.
Hands up, waving the white flag. Never read the white paper.
Brian,
Bad
but is that your
investor.
understanding as well? Like this was just part of the roadmap. Like let's just get started, and then third parties will build this out. Is that kind of your sentiment?
I guess so. I would probably need to go back and kind of look at what the context was. I mean, the impression I got is that just EVMs, ZK EVMs have arrived much quicker than anyone expected.
Really?
Yeah, and including Vitalik. So I think it's a bit of a revelation that basically we're there now. I think that's the vibe I'm getting from Vitalik now, is that it's pretty much job done. Doesn't mean it's gonna not gonna be improved, and there are lots of improvement proposals going through and all the rest of it. But it basically means that if he walked away tomorrow, he'd do so safe in the knowledge that the infrastructure layer was there.
And you know what's interesting about that is that that story arc is, or that life cycle, where Ethereum, basically the Ethereum Foundation, shifts from a developer focus to kind of an operational beast at that point. I think I saw at one point the average transaction fees they're taking in is something like, for even in, you know, today's world with lower gas fees and whatnot, and it will be lowered again, I think, after sharding and whatnot. They're taking in approximately 14 million a day in transaction fees. And so it's like, if you follow a lot of startups that are trying to get, say, for example, a SaaS product or an app up, they go through a similar thing where they're deving. They got a burn rate. But then they wake up one day and they're like, well, we got to focus on like operations and partnerships and onboarding. Do you guys, Jared, input, anybody, do you guys foresee that, like, as that shift happens, do you see the Ethereum Foundation shifting gears, or will they still just be developer central, or will they turn more into like a enterprise partnership program?
I feel like they've go Jared.
Yeah, I want to call it a couple things. One, just because he says that he's going to walk away from it, that's like a double-edged sword, right? Is that because he's like Charlie Lee leaving Litecoin? He's like, I'm out.
Which was devastating. Permanently devastating.
And is he just going to sell? And then, you know, I mean, he's got billions of dollars. So I like go back and forth. I don't think a project is ever fully done. I mean, even Bitcoin, there's still people like making sure that that network is like together. And Ethereum is a lot more of a fragmented network. It's not as simple. It's trying to do a bunch of different things. There's a bunch of different smart contracts that you can like write on it. So I don't think anything's ever really done. Ever in technology, you're always going to need an upgrade, or there's always going to be something else. The dawn of quantum computing is going to change everything, right? And there's always been that question: could they somehow figure out how to crack a blockchain? You know, we think it's this thing that's uncrackable. Well, you know, in the 1500s, you couldn't possibly have considered a commercial air flight, but here we are. So I think that things are constantly going to be in flux. And I just looked at the Ethereum white paper and I've searched ZK and I searched zero, and no mention of zero knowledge proofs. Now, there could be mention of scaling, and maybe they didn't call it zero knowledge proofs at the time because it was written, in 2014 or something. If Vitalik was a child like Austin was in 98. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I need to dive through the Ethereum white paper more, but I do think that the long term was never that Ethereum is going to be the answer to everything. And I think that's why Charles Hoskinson left, right? He wanted a one-all solution, and that's why I created Cardano. He didn't want like a hodgepodge solution where you have to like add on a bunch of different things to make it work. So I'm not really sure, but as far as like, is Ethereum going to be done when Vitalik walks away? Absolutely not. Was Apple done when Steve Jobs passed in 2011? Absolutely not. These things are going to continue to grow. And if Ethereum is going to underpin the future of ownership on the internet, then it's definitely not something that we can just not continue to build up upon. So
pause on that. You said underpin ownership. What were you talking about?
Ethereum. If it's going to be the biggest blockchain in Web3 to underpin the future of like what people are going to build on when it comes to Web3 projects, dApps, NFTs, whatever we don't even know, you know, DAOs, then I do think it's going to continue to need to be upgraded. So
Now, Brian, when you wrote about ZK rollups, I didn't read the article. I skimmed it. Aussie, you just read through it. Are you talking about like all of the layer twos in general? And obviously, you referenced Optimism. But what about Matic? Matic seems to be a unique case. Have you looked closely at Matic at all, or Polygon?
No, and I mean, I'm not quite sure how the existing Polygon L2. I mean, is it that they're going to be switching over to this new scaling solution, or is it an entirely separate side chain? I'm assuming it's all part of the same project, but I'll have to go back and have a look.
To be fair and to be accurate, I'm not entirely sure, but my impression is that it is part of the same project. They are a layer 2, but they are also very ambitious at being their own layer 1. And their scale is already significantly larger than Ethereum. And I'm watching Polygon closely because if someone like, Vitalik leaving to me is less of a sign of is Ethereum fully baked or not? Like, I mean, I agree with Jared. Nothing's ever done. And I don't think that's what Brian was saying necessarily. I think Vitalik was saying my function here is like fulfilled in terms of my personal
yeah,
vision.
I mean, he didn't give any kind of indication that he was ready to walk away. I think he was just gratified that it's grown up now. You know what?
Yeah.
It's no longer.
I feel like he's
no longer
more
an
of a
adolescent.
face now than he is like he's still a brainchild behind it, and he still provides, I think, that guiding direction that they need in a CEO, essentially in a CEO type function. But I feel like he is more of
he's the brand.
A brand. He is the brand. Vitalik Buterin is a brand now. He's not a developer.
What? What is
what?
Funny,
Why are you laughing at me?
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at Vitalik being a brand.
He is, man.
I know.
That kid,
I know
that
he
kid
is.
shirt. And so when we think about Polygon, for example, Polygon, like, could any of us could any of us name a face behind Polygon?
Austin Berkeley?
No. I mean, I know there's one. There's got to be one, right? But I think that that's a double-edged sword, Aussie, because maybe what Vitalik is expressing, I mean, he is not Mr. Extrovert, right? Like maybe he doesn't want that pressure, and this is true of most startups, regardless of Web3. When they nerd alert on something and they build something out, and then they realize, okay, the next phase is an operational phase, and that ain't me, bros. Like I agree with Brian. I think his role, maybe he's not exiting, but his role has to dramatically change. And they do need to put someone operationally in, because I'm telling you this, and I'll stand by this, and we talked about this in a different episode. I believe the crypto winter was tipped over by a lack of operational minds behind true, experienced executives behind crypto projects, and they just collapsed because it's a bunch of devs who get it ideologically, but they have no chops when it comes to how are we going to grow this thing, what's actually good for our budget. But I think maybe Vitalik, he's smart enough cat to know that ain't me, folks. Give me some code and we're ready to go. Give me some nerds at like a hackathon and we'll do some damage. But Ethereum can't thrive on that, especially with this, because now we're getting into like, I think economics is important, and that's a sociological thing. And I think what Polygon's got going for it, it's press release after press release after press release of its very mature projects coming out that are standalone from Ethereum. And not that we're like comparing Ethereum to Polygon directly, but from a marketing perspective, I think that they are being compared very closely. I don't know. But to go back to your question, Brian, I'm not entirely sure what the roadmap exactly is, but I know Polygon, I mean, I want to publish all of our NFTs on Polygon Matic. There's no way I'd go to Ethereum right now. Now, is that justified though? Because mine's just a perception of gas fees, difficulty. They're now the big brother in the market, and Polygon still feels like the underdog. I don't know, but what are your impressions on it? Those are kind of my impressions about Polygon and its dominance in the market, or lack thereof. Is it an underdog or not?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a multi-chain world. Clearly, the
Yeah.
Ethereum ecosystem has a huge center of gravity. So EVM compatible chains and the top side chains that run on them are pretty much guaranteed a continued existence, I think.
Interesting.
Um,
And
I
I do
mean,
think interoperability is the future, hands down.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sooner or later, a lot of the kind of clunky UI, UX, and bridges and all the rest is going to disappear from our field of view. And I hope
Yeah.
sooner rather than later. But the other thing that's worth saying about scaling is, when you think about, I like to use this analogy because it's one that's simple to visualize. But the cost of the economics of taking a photograph when in an analog world, went from this arcane science experiment with chemicals to something like a box brownie and a Polaroid camera and whatever, and then it went to digital. And obviously, in a digital world, the economics of a photo are entirely different to an analog world, so that people wind
Mm.
up taking pictures of their shopping list rather than taking the piece of paper with them, as using their smartphones as an aid memoir, so that you take a photo of something simply because you want to remember, like a screenshot, basically.
Yeah.
Now, you think about NFTs and the difference between Ethereum and Solana, and why people migrated to Solana and still love it in terms of NFTs and so on. I think what we're going to see is you'll be able to mint an NFT for a fraction of a cent or whatever. It changes the use cases. The use cases then suddenly explode, and that's what all of this NFT ticketing and all kinds of things. So I think scalability is also about kind of just opening up this kind of funnel in terms
Mm.
of potential applications.
I want to jump on what Brian just said, because he said two things that I think are really salient, and jump on two topics that I've talked about on decentralized news on our most recent episode.
Hmm.
So interoperability
Yeah.
and opening up the world for use cases, especially regarding Solana. Injective protocol, which is an L1 on Cosmos, has just released their new, I forget what it's called, but it's a Solana Cosmos bridge called with the wormhole. So you can now bring products between Solana and the Cosmos ecosystem.
With a better UX, like better UI, like single click, you're ready to go.
I haven't tried it, but
Interesting.
It's a new announcement. It's a new newsletter press release from them, and that's
Interesting.
massive, because Solana. One of the biggest things that I've got against Solana is that it's Solana by itself. If Solana goes down, Solana's you can't do anything,
Yeah.
and it's kind of all on its own. But if Solana can talk with the other blockchains, then it actually has a chance of surviving. And so
Interesting.
that interoperability between Solana and Cosmos, which is probably, I'd say, one of the three competitors. You've got Solana, you've got Cosmos, and you've got EVM. If you call that, if you want to talk about AVAX, Matic, Arbitrum, Ethereum, that group. And so if Solana and Cosmos can start talking, then there's a whole world of possibilities for that entire ecosystem. But then
Interesting.
the other thing he talked about is being able to bring more use cases to NFTs.
Yes.
And I'm going to take it away from just NFTs. I want to take it to crypto and everything in general. I'm sure everyone who uses Twitter, Brian, I'm sorry, I don't know if you use Twitter too much, but I'm not a huge Twitter guy either.
Yeah.
Badly, he says.
I'm not good at Twitter either. I use it, but I'm not good at it. Everyone's seen the Doge meme.
Yes.
Like the Doge symbol is now the Twitter logo.
Oh yeah.
No one knows how long or why or what's happening. But
Until Doge gets to $1. He didn't know that, Aussie?
Doge to $1,
Exactly.
despite it being one of the most inflationary cryptos there is. But I think that even if Doge, like if they make Doge the currency of Twitter, that it actually has a use case. Like it actually, because it's so cheap, the fact that it's 11 cents makes it so cheap to tip someone or to make it a transaction currency, whereas Ethereum, Bitcoin isn't a cheap transaction currency. And so that's where Doge, as much as it's a joke and it's a meme coin, there is in some extent a use case or a potential use case for it because of its large supply, the fact that it's proof of work, and that it is it's got such a low price that it can easily, like, it's very accessible. So we're also seeing that with NFTs and with the different chains. And so to bring it back to what Brian just said.
Now, on this about multi-chain, Brian, and kind of tying what Aussie's saying there, and Aussie, I did want to call out affordability. Like this is kind of what I think Allison's getting at here: equality of access to ensure mass adoption. And by mass adoption, we're talking about now emerging markets, right? Like the actual onboarding of the world, which, for those who don't know, is kind of Allison's world of equality of access. AVAX is a big one. I remember even over a year and a half ago, I was flipping or swapping into AVAX for more affordable transaction fees, and then just swapping elsewhere when it came to something more expensive. So I realized that myself, even as a a person in the United States. But these emerging markets will also see that. So in a world where interoperability is there, Solana, let's say Solana bridges well through whatever means, wormhole in this case, but others, so it's a little more stable. In a world of like perfect interoperability, does this imply, and this Jarrett or Brian, I'd love to hear from you on this, does this imply that every chain then specializes and blockchains are just specialty at that point? Like, why pick a chain? They can't all do the same thing. We can't all sell bananas to each other and call it a barter society, right? Like, yeah. Jared's like, wait, what? What did Chelsea score again? He's actually watching the scores. What do you think, Brian?
That's a good question, actually. I haven't really sort of thought that through. I mean, you've clearly got, on the one hand, you've got the whole thing about network effects. Ethereum isn't going anywhere, for example. And there's clearly some shadow between Bitcoin and Ethereum, in terms of one being having a different narrative and Ethereum being the OG sort of smart contract platform. But at the point where the user doesn't actually know or need to know, or things are being moved between one chain and another and all of the infrastructure layers disappear. I mean, a lot of people are trying to find out whether the real value in terms of, like, if you're thinking about investing in crypto, whether the real value will accrue to the layer ones or the layer twos or the dApps. And it's a good question. When all of that stuff disappears because of good UX, what does that mean in terms of the business case for all of these different chains? I mean, the reality is we probably don't need nearly as many as we've got already, but I think really it's to do with, I mean, I wondered a while ago whether or not the two, when you're looking at the blockchain trilemma, and take that as a baseline that you're able to cover off the, scalability, security, and decentralization to your satisfaction. Does it really come down to cost of transaction and time to finality were the two kind of parameters that I kind of identified as being perhaps the ones that you could look at when you were looking to spot the winners. For example, Avalanche has good metrics on that, and so do a number of other chains. But I wonder, in terms of a race to the finish line, whether or not it's ultimately about cost and time to finality, given a uniform playing field across the rest of them. Obviously, Solana's done very well on that, but comes up kind of slightly short in terms of what you might call security and maybe even decentralization.
You definitely. Well, go ahead, Aussie. Well, I see you waving a finger.
Yeah. So I think there's something that he's missing. I think those 2 points are great, but there's ease of development. Ease of development is something that people don't talk about, not enough, at least, in the crypto space. And it's finding a Rust developer, for example, which is the language underlying Solana, is a lot harder and a lot more expensive and a lot clunkier to find than someone that can build in Solidity. Or I don't even know what the language underlying Cosmos is, but I don't believe it's Solidity. So depending on the different languages, that is what's going to be the easiest. That's going to affect what chains survive. And that's why I still feel that EVM and Ethereum layer 1s and layer 2s built on Ethereum are more likely to survive, because Solidity is so close to other existing programming languages that are used in Web 2. And so that will allow those chains to thrive and grow because they have that accessibility. And it's easier to bring developers from the Web 2 space into the Web 3 space because they aren't learning an entirely new, challenging language.
So you raise a good point, Jarrett. I want to pass the mic to you, and I ask you this question. You could dump this question if you have another thought, but you've done enough interviews with More Than Blockchain that you have touched on a great amount of true projects. Are, like, just surveying in your head, are most of these projects like Ethereum or Ethereum layer 2, or are they working on their own side chains or boutique chains of sorts? Do you have kind of a sense of the world from your interviews?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Grant. And I'd have to go back. And what I can do for the next episode is I'll go through all the founders and the builders, and I'll come out with the exact chains, and I'll be able to tell you the numbers.
Sure.
But for example, Brandon with Formless, he's totally just using the EVM, right? The Ethereum virtual machine. That's an integral part of how the protocol that they've created, Share, works and integrates. Domingo from Homebase DAO, they are using Solana.
I was wondering about this.
Yeah, they're using Solana, and they're using USDC, the stablecoin, on Solana. So
wow,
it's a very interesting thing. And I guess I'd push back against what Aussie's saying. Like, I hear what he's saying, and I think it sounds intuitive, because it probably is for most use cases. But just because a language is maybe not as easy or not as applicable, like, when you're jumping from Web 2 to Web 3, right? If you're going from like just JavaScript to Solidity or something, or if you're a Python coder and you're going to jump to Solidity, let's say that those are closer together. If there's something else that's going to make more sense to learn, then you're going to do it, even if it's not as easy to learn. And the example here is that there are so many kids in the United States right now who are being forced to learn Mandarin because their parents see China and they're like, oh shit, we got to learn Chinese, when Spanish is right there. It's so much easier to learn and even more applicable, but they're going to learn this other language because that's a tactical thing. So it's like strategy versus tactics. So that's the one thing that I would say. And I would say that, like, oh God, what's the guy? He's the author, Brian. Maybe you can help me, Grant, Aussie, who I'm looking at my bookshelf and I think it's a blocked book. I don't think I can see it. He writes about it's The Sticking Point, the author of The Sticking Point. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
I know the book. I do not know the author. Yeah.
Okay. I'm blanking on the author. When I say the author, I'm like, oh yeah, duh. He talks about how things don't always have to make sense in order for them to stick. And the thing I constantly think about is the keyboard that's in front of us. Yeah. And that's the QWERTY keyboard, right? And we know there are people that have come up with more intuitive keyboards for us to use the English language to be able to type, so you can learn easier just to type. Because the way this is laid out doesn't make sense. But because it's already so universal, it's like, that's what we're going to go with. We're not going to change it now. That's how we've been typing for, I don't know, probably better part of an entire century. So that's kind of there. Like Solidity, while it is more tied into I think it is, and I've heard that same thing. And I've looked at Solidity and tried to learn Solidity for a little bit.
It's tough.
Well, it's tough. While it is, closer to maybe Python or something, or JavaScript, or an older coding language, if there's a newer language that comes out that's just easier, even if it's easier, but it's not tied to the EVM, will it matter? It's like if you're an alien and you come down from space, right? You're not going to learn a Mayan language.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn Swedish. You wouldn't even learn German, as great as it is. You would stick to English, Arabic, Spanish, or Mandarin, and you would pick between those. You wouldn't even go with French, which used to be a more of an international language. So I think the idea of languages is a very interesting one, but I would like to look at my own episodes and come back and share that. And Aussie, I think we should look, maybe you can look at GitHub, or Grant, you can look at GitHub for commits, and Aussie, you can bring another angle, because I think that's a very, very interesting point. When
Solidity
it ties
all
into
day long.
everything that we're talking about. And I'm glad Aussie kind of brought that up and pointed that out as a interesting angle to mass adoption. If people can't build it, just like a language, if it's so hard for people to pick up and speak, it's just not going to go anywhere. That's why English is everywhere, because it's a stupid language. Sorry, guys. It's a very basic language. When you compare it to like Mandarin,
Sure.
So it's a beautiful language.
A living example of this in Web 2 is, for those who don't know, Brian, you probably don't know this. I have a web design company, and, we design websites. We're looking at, pivoting into the niche for crypto companies, because they have specific design needs, just front end needs, but then they also have unique development needs. And we're looking at some of that. But there's a major debate that goes on right now. Shopify is one everyone knows. And they are a beast. They're publicly traded. They have a war chest. They have a good amount of cash. They have a strong reputation. If you go to any e-commerce incubator or co-working space, they're recommending Shopify all day long. I am here to tell you, Shopify is the worst under the hood. It is the worst. It has its own coding language called Liquid. It is the worst. To find a Shopify developer, you're paying 4 times as much as a WordPress developer. It's impossible to find them, and they very rarely succeed at their project, because they themselves, as native Shopify coders, because of its internal system, is trash. However, Shopify is taking massive market share. I say massive. WordPress still has 63 to 68% of the world's website market share, but Shopify is starting to show up. It's a living example where there's people like me who I am actively firing my Shopify clients, because I'm telling them, I'm not going to learn this language. I don't care. Yet the beast itself, Shopify, is still growing. So my only point in bringing this up is it's a living example in Web 2 that the writing's not written on the wall what's going to win the day. That there's this real dilemma of development. So also, I think it is a nuanced call. I think it has to be considered how easy something is to develop on. But to Jarrett's point, if it's the beast in the room and enough people are learning on it, and there's enough usable for the layperson, clickable apps that we want to see survive, people are going to figure it out and make it work and just charge what they're going to charge. I really think that's going to be the case. I still think, though, that most other chains, like I think we'll think of Ethereum as an architecture chain, but I think most other chains will have to begin to niche specifically into like identification protocols, like for IDs. There's so many kinds of IDs. And when we get into a ZK proof world, and Brian, are you versed at all in ZK proof? Like IDs and stuff?
Only in sort of layman's terms, really. I understand its importance to.
That's good, because that's your newsletter. Real quick, 2 comments. Crypto Moose says, I love Matic. They have solid partnerships. And then he goes on to say, or she goes on to say, English is like Bitcoin, simple to use, good for everyone. Cardano and Ethereum is for us. Buy crypto speaking studs. We will win. So let me ask that. What do you know, Brian, if anything, about Cardano?
Not much, really, actually. I know, probably less than you. I know that they seem to be very large in sort of Africa and the global south, and that they have a very loyal and strong development community, and I really respect Charles Hoskinson. I've been listening to quite a lot of the stuff he's been talking about recently about some of the bigger picture stuff to do with synthetic biology and AI and blockchain and all the rest of it. So he's a smart guy. I wouldn't bet against him. I mean, I had a joke that Cardano was a stable coin at one stage because it doesn't seem to have done much as an asset. But,
we could probably peg the DAI coin or the USDC to Cardano instead of the US dollar.
Perhaps it's got a really important role to play.
Brian, that was such a Web3 joke. Like anyone hearing this is like, he called Cardano a stable coin. Why is that funny? It's like, dude, that's funny. Brian, thank you for that giggle. I just smiled a lot because I feel like Grant, I don't know, tied your hands up, put you in a basement, and started asking about Cardano on live TV there.
No, not tied in your own basement. In your girlfriend's new boyfriend's basement.
Exactly. And there's a Twitch stream on, right?
Yeah. Just asking random. Yeah, go ahead.
That was my Houdini effort anyway.
What do you got, Jared?
No, I just we got I want to shout out Crypto Moose. Crypto Moose, thanks for that comment. English is like Bitcoin. I love that.
Yeah.
Raoul Pal in a recent newsletter, and he called, what did he say? Bitcoin is the Bitcoin and Bitcoin community is analogous to the Catholic Church in like the 1600s because they're stuck in their ways and they won't advance. And then shout out Good Day Crypto, Sean Clark. It is like
Sean
I don't
Clark.
know. I think it's 5:30 a.m. over in Australia.
Australia,
so
yeah. Good
up,
morning,
he's
sir.
up watching the Not Crypto Bros. Brian, I wanted to ask you with your newsletter, do you think it's newbie friendly? Like if somebody comes across it, can they understand it, or is there just enough nuance or enough like inside
jargon.
Jokes? Like for example, jargon or inside jokes, like even like the Cardano joke, right? You have to have been around crypto for at least 6 months, a year, potentially longer. I've been watching Cardano since 2017, never touched it, and it feels like a stable coin. So does Litecoin. What are some other ones? VeChain is honestly, it's gone up, but it's back down to where it always is. There are some coins that seem to just stay in their comfort zone, maybe. But when you look at your newsletter, does it feel like it's approachable for someone who's literally knows nothing about crypto and they come into it? Because I think Not Crypto Bros, and I'll give you the example. I think Not Crypto Bros is for a certain level of crypto acumen, for a lack of a better word. You can't just kind of stumble onto us and think and just pick up everything, right? It's not there. So does your newsletter do that? And not saying it needs to. I'm just wondering from like a
target
writing
audience
standpoint, who are you writing to?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I've only done, it's a new gig for me, and I've only done the kind of inaugural edition. I guess I've got a foot in both camps, really. I've got quite a lot of friends who know very little about crypto, and I've got them to give me some feedback on the first one. And
that's
it's actually, it's quite encouraging, actually, in terms of the fact that they were interested. They thought I should have perhaps used more hyperlinks so that if I'm mentioning something like sharding,
interesting,
they can go off and check it out. But I mean, it may be hard to keep the interest of a crypto savvy community without alienating complete newbies and vice versa. So it's a bit of a tightrope walk, but
and it's almost like, the lay person in your title is really the lay crypto person. And I think the onboarding path for a lot of people into crypto is fortunately and unfortunately traders. And I think that they see crypto, they see trading, and they see a newsletter, especially a Substack, and they think, okay, I want to know a little bit more, if nothing more than from a greed incentive. I want to understand, like, when someone says ZK rollup is coming to this, that, or the other chain, that might mean a bump in the market. And maybe we have an opportunity to have an intelligent conversation with them about, this is so much more than speculation and trading, guys. Like, there is heavy tech occurring. And so maybe your newsletter is in that realm. But I wanted to jump on your newsletter real quick and ask you, why didn't you do like a mirror protocol instead of a Substack? I was curious, and not that I'm judgy, because when I think about doing my own newsletter, I don't think about Mirror Protocol. It's tantalizing, but it just feels like there's some barrier there that I can't put my finger on. Why didn't you choose a crypto-based, micropayment-based platform? Well, I guess technically it's a
Good
micropayment,
question.
but
Yeah. I mean, I did quite a lot of research, and I got some recommendations. I mean, and I really believe in the Substack team
yeah.
in terms of the proposition. I mean, it's a bit basic. You know, they've made some sacrifices in terms of, for example, graphic design,
Yeah.
but specifically in terms of the monetization and the fact that they have a platform that people come onto to read content already, as well as, you know, being able to bring newsletters, like email subscribers over. I'm pretty much starting from scratch. I've obviously had a bit of a bump with people that follow me on LinkedIn. But, you know,
Yeah.
the idea being that if you can get 2,000 or 3,000 paid subscribers paying whatever, $8, $10 a month, then, you know, that looks like quite a nice revenue stream.
Yeah. Jarrett, you're on Medium, right?
Grant, I thought your question was really salient because when I started I've been writing on the internet for more than a decade now, and I just restarted again and did 6 articles and then haven't done anything for a couple weeks, and that's life. But
That's
I'm
life.
on Medium, and I looked at Substack, and I actually really like Substack. If for no other reason from a creator, every time I go on Substack, it asks me subscribe, and you have to find the continue reading, and it will do that multiple times, and that really probably forces people to be like, all right, here's my email. I enjoyed this. I don't really even have that many followers on on Medium, but I'm thinking about just going right over to Mirror and taking my Bitcoin is scarcity article and bringing it over to Mirror and just doing it on Mirror because I think Mirror is the more Web3 way. But I do think I sacrifice a more easier route to monetizing. An easier route to monetizing that Brian's talking about because I think Substack's really I mean, you look at who's on Substack, like Pompliano's on Substack, so everyone should probably be on
Oh.
Substack. Some of the brow pals on Substack, you should probably be on Substack. So maybe I'll go to Substack, but I'm definitely think I'm going to move away from Medium, and I may just literally migrate everything and shut my Medium down because I
I mean, I
definitely,
think, you know, Medium's
yeah.
great for long form articles, isn't it? And whatever, you know, sort of, I would see it as a kind of a place to write 1,000-word articles, 1,500-word articles, or whatever, and they look really good. Substack for me was another one, you know, that to get into the habit of writing something that's dropped direct to people's email inboxes, like periodically, whether it's daily or weekly. For me, it's going to be weekly.
Interesting.
You know, that it's good to get into that habit. Whereas I have a Medium account and I've published 1 or 2 things there, and then I don't, you know, whereas now I have to produce this newsletter weekly. So it's a good way to force myself to actually take it on board.
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Aussie, go ahead. What's your thought there?
So I was thinking there isn't enough Web3 adoption to take anything just to a Web3 platform.
I was thinking similarly. Go ahead.
I think right now it's you're either Web 2 or you're Web 3. But I think right now we're starting to forge the path, and this is something you, Jarrett, and I have all talked about, of Web 2.5. So merging Web
2.5, yes.
and Web 3 so that you're being accessible to both audiences. So yeah, you can post on Mirror, but you can also have a Substack and try to use both platforms. So as your clientele evolves, maybe if you're Brian and you've got your layman's terms newsletter and you want to, hey, I don't want to bore my more advanced audience as my audience matures with me.
Yeah.
You come to Mirror and you can get my Web3 high level, not layman's terms newsletter every week. And that's a way of kind of bridging the worlds of Web 2 and Web 3 into Web 2.5.
And it boils down to mission. You know, and I guess you could oversimplify and say, well, what's my niche? But like maybe take a pause first and say, what's my mission here? And you know, I think each of us, I know me and Jared and Aussie and Brian, I assume you too, we all have probably nuanced missions. I myself view myself as an absolute trainer, educator, edutainer, maybe, you know, like I want to make sure that I stay at that 2.5 place. I want 1 foot in both worlds. And, you know, if I were to pick a platform, it probably would be something like Substack where, you know, maybe it's got enough of a mix and my Web3 people wouldn't mind jumping in on that. They're not going to, minimize that. But then my Web2 people would feel fine and unthreatened. And I think as a designer, I also think crypto design, literal UX, visual design. Of course, the heavy tech needs better interface, and that's coming. But even our basic interfaces, like how we're designing, like Mirror still feels like visually, it's often a weird corner of the internet, just visually. And Substack has a minimalist approach, kind of in the vein of Medium, even though Medium and Substack look quite differently, they still carry very minimalist, approachable designs. And, you know, it sounds trivial and trite, but I don't think it is. I think the onboarding, Brian, for your newsletter was sublimely simple to go subscribe, pay, go. I mean, like, you can't shake a stick at that. And you've seen decent growth with your newsletter? Have you been...
Well, I mean, it's what we're sort of 6 days in at the moment.
Yeah. I didn't.
Yeah. So last Friday was the first drop. So
all right. So you're a millionaire. Okay, I get it. Yeah. I mean,
no.
I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing.
I'm starting off free. I've had a couple of people pledge subscriptions, including Ken Cato, who I think is listening in today.
Yeah, Ken's brilliant. Yeah.
But you can choose to switch the payments on or leave them dormant for a while. But, my idea really is to try and actually develop a readership before worrying about trying to monetize it, really.
Yeah, that's Web3 ethos right there. That's Web3 ethos. I like that, man. And I think micropayments are the key. And kind of going back to our tokens, Dogecoin aside, what currency will be our micropayment currency? Is Sats really getting traction as people understanding Sats? You don't think so, Aussie?
No, it's not Sats. It's too expensive to transact on Bitcoin. It's way too expensive.
It's not that bad on Lightning, Aussie. It's really not.
It's not that bad. But what if Bitcoin becomes $1 million? What if we go with your Bitcoin maxi mindset and Bitcoin gets to $1 million by 2030? That SAT is incredibly expensive. So
wait, are you saying the transaction fee is
transaction fee based currency? Like if you're talking $1 million Bitcoin, the price of a SAT is still way too high to make it accessible across the world, and especially considering transaction fees.
I mean, right now, Sats are like 3,000 to the dollar, give or take, right?
Less, right?
Maybe less. So I mean, maybe to you, Brian, like, what do you think is the microtransactions? And when I think the reason this is connected to your thing is this: NFT today is pioneering phenomenally. I think Jarrett and I were looking at this. Aussie, you might have seen this too. NFT today, zero advertising. News service on NFTs. They're a phenomenal platform.
NFT now.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. And they had a great NFT mint pass, but then they're also doing access with micropayments. And there's a lot of tokenomics experimentations that I'm very impressed with. But like, what do you think will be our micropayment transaction of the future, of the near future?
Well, I mean, you've got to look at, I kind of enjoyed that, I can't remember his name now. Is it Jack? It's the guy from Strike, the payment processing guy.
Jack Mallers. Yep.
Yeah. So, and he did a demo using crypto, a point of sale. He did various different demos, one over Tor, one over Lightning, I think, or whatever. But his idea is that the merchant can receive fiat, or they can receive Bitcoin, or they can choose their currency, and he can choose which currency to send them. I mean, I think that's the way it's going, in the sense that it's going to be agnostic.
Interesting.
I mean, obviously, different networks will have different profiles in terms of how economically feasible that is for microtransactions, but I don't think it's not a kind of a winner takes all scenario, would be my call.
The downside to that, in my opinion, is that means we will still price and think in terms of price to our centralized currencies, the pound, the Canadian dollar, the US dollar. And I think that the craving in nearly all informed Web3 people is the craving to truly think in a decentralized denomination. I would love that day. And we talked about flat coins. Did you see any of that conversation, or you've been looking at
Yeah,
flat coins,
yeah,
Brian?
yeah.
I'm
Not
very
much,
intrigued.
but yeah.
I'm very intrigued, and maybe we could have a follow-up conversation when we have more time to talk about flat coins one day, because I'm hopeful for that. But I think you're right from just like a probability standpoint. But that saddens me a little, because in the end, I'll still be pricing things in terms of the US dollar, which is losing its purchasing power. Whereas if I could price it in a Bitcoin and maybe pay US dollars, but go ahead.
The NFT community is already pricing things in ETH, isn't it? And Sotheby's listed ETH as a on the price board in their auction house for the first time, whenever it was, 2021.
Mhm.
And you think about people moving over to the metric system. I still can't figure out for the life of me what 1 meter 83 means in terms of someone's height, for example. Whereas if you say whatever 5'11", I know what you mean. So it's it's a question of conditioning
Brian.
and what you grow up with. You know what I mean?
You didn't grow up with like metric heights, like like imperial heights?
Well, the UK is a bit of a strange one. It was a bit of a mix,
Oh,
but yeah. So yards and feet and inches more than meters I
that
grew up
shocks me.
in the 70s and 80s. So
So okay, wow. So I have a question about crypto, but this is more important now. So, for example, you would understand, Brian, if I said someone's 5'8" and 12 stone. Would you get that?
yeah.
Jesus, that's messed up. Anyways,
Yeah.
back to crypto.
Whereas if you told me how much they weighed in pounds, I wouldn't have a clue. Yeah.
Okay, so this is
So it's
interesting.
even weirder.
So
It's so weird.
this is so interesting. So I do heights in feet and inches. We do heights in Canada. That's how we do height. But we do pounds, and we do distance in kilometers. But we do certain things in there's a couple things. Pool temperature is more likely done in Fahrenheit than it is done in Celsius in Canada.
That's because no one has pools.
It's a
What are you
foreign
talking
concept.
about? We all have pools. It's hot here in the summer.
You guys,
Don't be so
I'm
defensive.
telling you, of all the things that blew my mind in this conversation,
It's 2 week summer. Yeah. Exactly.
is these things.
Look at him. Look at him. Look at him. I like how he gets so angry when you pick on Canada. Brian, I wanted to make a comment there about something, and now I lost it because you understand 5'8" and 12 stone. Crap. You know what? It was I think it was the idea that one of the things I've toyed with, and I think I may do, is have a Substack and then have the exact same article on Mirror. And at the bottom of the Substack say, if you want to mint this, just go to Mirror. Because that's all it is.
Right.
That's the only difference. From what I've seen, Medium does better once you're on Medium. It's easier to search. Substack does better externally as opposed to internally, like Medium. And then Mirror is just going to allow you to create whatever you want to create, and then you can just mint it. So if it's a cool article, someone could mint it, then they get to own the article, etc. So
that sounds like a great idea. If you don't have to choose, do you? You can just take the best of all worlds.
Yeah, and I think like my final thing was that like even the people that are most Web3, they're still living in Web2 97% of the time.
Yes.
Like because you own an NFT doesn't make you Web3, right? When you're somehow transacting, when you're getting paid in Ethereum and you're transacting in Ethereum and you're saving in Bitcoin and you don't touch fiat, then I'll believe it. But like even the deepest people, like I'm going to NFT NYC next week and everyone's going to be using dollars, so
That's right.
it's just kind of a funny thing there.
And more than half of them, I would dare tell you 80-20 rule, 80% of them had to take time off from their Web2 job that doesn't understand them. And they might hold down a community manager role in Web3. They might hold down some function. But you know what? Report back though, because I would be pleased to be wrong. But it's a good call, and it's not a dig to anyone. It's just the reality that we are 2.5. You know, let's do some shout outs real quick. I'll let Aussie go. I'll go. Jarrett, you go, and then Brian, you can go. Or Brian goes third, and then Jarrett, you go last to wrap us up real quick. So Aussie, start with your shout outs, bro.
I'm always terrible at shout outs, but
just shout out Canada, you know?
Yeah, I'm gonna shout out Canada. I'm also gonna shout out my coworkers actually, because my coworkers asked me to do a presentation on blockchain in our staff meeting tomorrow. And
your Web 2 job.
At my Web 2 job. So I'm gonna do a
that's the
presentation on blockchain in Web 2. So
I got a shout out to our global audience. I mean, we had a real global audience today. It felt like people coming from the four corners. We generally have a good international audience, but with Sean Clark popping in from Good Day Crypto, he's got a great show. Check him out. And who else did we have? George Pate? No, George Pate's in the US.
George Pate's in
Allison.
Houston. Yeah.
Allison in the UK, but Brian's in the UK too. I'm going to pretend Crypto Moose is also from Canada. Just shout out Mounties. But no, our comments always tend to make our shows a bit more interesting. So my shout out to that today. Brian, do you have any shout outs? Any projects or people you need to shout out?
I hadn't really thought about it. Shout out to Ken and Alison and anyone else in the chat room. I haven't been keeping an eye on the what's going on in the chat room.
That's all right.
And anyone who is upset with Gary Gensler as a human being as well.
Okay, I'm just gonna shout out that comment. Shout out that comment
to anyone angry at Gary Gensler, including his niece, who's angry because he didn't bring her a pony for her birthday. Anyone upset with Gary Gensler, we'll shout out Gary's niece. What do you got, Jarrett? Wrap us up.
God, how do I follow that? Brian's roast of the day. I want to shout out that one of the things I remember my comment. I'll make the comment and do the shout out. BSV is really good for micropayments. You'd asked me, what are people building on? One of the people I've had on has an arcade, and it's all based off micropayments, and they use BSV. So that really breaks down really quick. So my shout out will be for anyone going to NFT NYC next week. Out there, hit me up. I'm trying to get my calendar completely filled up with stuff to do. I'll have a colleague of mine who's a Web3 non-native. So she's going to get baptized in the fire of degendum. It should be ridiculous. And nice. Brian, it's good to have you on. We normally see you in the comments, so it's kind of surreal to have you on. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
So on both counts. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Check us out next week, Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thanks so much, everybody.